Hello, hello. Welcome to the PG-ish podcast. I'm Erin with your parental guidance to help you grow yourself as a parent and raise healthy, happy, and successful humans. I had the pleasure to meet and have a conversation with Sara Olsher. Sara went through a divorce, a major move, and career change, and cancer treatment, all in her daughter's first 7 years of life. When she found herself frustrated by the lack of resources for cancer patients with young kids, Sara started designing resources specific to cancer, including a now best-selling children's book about the science of cancer that is used in hospitals around the world. Sara's company, Mighty and Bright, began for the same reason many parents start companies. She wanted to help her own daughter and invented a product to do just that. For nearly 10 years, she's been building Mighty and Bright to help parents talk about and thrive through difficult experiences. Now, you likely can relate because on some level, you know that when you're dealing with something hard, so is your kiddo. They feel your energy. They see your furrowed brow and see your tears. And though your child is usually your number one priority, often they take a back seat when you're trying to just survive. Sara has a background in psychology and is a passionate advocate for both kids and parents' mental health and has the goal to help parents help their kids during the worst circumstances. I trust you'll enjoy our conversation as much as I enjoyed meeting and chatting with Sara. Check it out. Sara, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. And I love stories. I just love people. And I think that we focus too much on the destination. And I think there's so much in between. So can you share how you started Mighty and Bright?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I have had quite a journey. I would say, I in my 20s had this vision of what my life was going to look like. And, I got married and I had a baby and then it all fell apart. When she was 18 months old, her dad and I got a divorce and she just had a terrible amount of anxiety and it was really, really hard to watch. She couldn't sleep. She got kicked out of daycare because she couldn't stop crying. Nothing that I was doing was helping. I really felt like there was no solution to it that I had within my power. And so I found a therapist, even though she was like 2. And I thought, you know what? If there is somebody that, it has even a remote chance of helping us, I'm doing it. And her dad was like, okay, she's 2. What is a therapist going to do? Like, she can't even really communicate. And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know, but I need help. And I couldn't find any. So we went to this therapist and I had studied psychology in grad school and in college, but I'd studied adults. And so when I started talking to this therapist and started learning about kids, I was absolutely fascinated. I realized pretty quickly that her dad and I had both totally underestimated how much she could understand about the world around her, and that her anxiety was coming from a very real place of not understanding what was going on. I mean, I had been running a business at home, and so I had been a stay-at-home mom, and then all of a sudden everything was changing, and she was going to daycare with people she didn't know. And I tried to prepare her for stuff, but it just wasn't at the level that it needed to be. And we found out when she was in first grade, she actually has a hearing loss. And so she went from our very quiet house to being in daycare where it was really loud, and she probably couldn't understand people, like the words that they were speaking. So she had a lot going on. And so I just really learned a lot about the way that kids learn, the way that they communicate. And one of the things that was a real game changer for me was when we went to see the therapist, and the therapist was going on vacation, and she took out this, basically she made this construction paper calendar using these little Dora the Explorer stickers. And she's like, usually you see me on this day, but you're not going to see me on this day. Instead, you're going to see me on this day. And I said, is this really like necessary? I feel like she doesn't have a concept of time. So
Hmm.
how is she going to understand this? And the therapist said, well, she might not understand the concept of time, but she, can kind of tell, how long it's been since she's seen me. It's been a long time. And if you don't communicate that to your kids, it can actually really erode the trust between the child and the therapist.
Hmm.
And the whole way home, I'm thinking to myself, if missing a week of therapy and not talking about it and like showing it to her, because at this point I'd learned, kids learn visually.
Right.
If that is going to affect her, how is it affecting her that she has literally no concept of when she's going to see her dad next? That is probably really stressful. And this was 10 years ago now. And when I got home, I took an oil drip pan that I'd had. They're made to go under refrigerators
Hmm.
to catch the drips, but they're magnetic. And so I'd had this thing hanging on the wall with all these like alphabet letters. So I ripped it off the wall and I put it in the kitchen, and I used electrical tape and some magnets that I made where I'd drawn pictures of our family on it so that she would know which day she would see her dad, which day she'd be with me, and which days were school days. So I lay this whole thing out. And when I tell you it was like night and day, I am not exaggerating. It completely changed everything.
Yeah.
And she just seemed to be so much more comfortable because she understood when she was going to see us, when she was going to be at school. There wasn't that level of like dread and
Hmm.
kind of, I mean, when you think about it as an adult, like I have an existential crisis when when I don't know what is happening.
Of course.
When things are changing, especially, we start making lists. Like it is the way that we function as
Hmm.
humans. But we kind of forget that our kids are also humans who
Yeah.
need the same sort of thing, but they need it just a little bit different because of the way that they learn and how just developmentally they can't keep all this
Right.
information in their heads. So I started Googling to see if anybody was creating something like this to sell because I was going to tell every human that I had ever met about it. And no one was talking about it. There were no co-parenting calendars. There was nothing.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it really was. And so I thought, well, I can't tell people about things that don't exist. And not everybody is going to want this ugly, thing hanging on their wall that I had created. So I made a cuter version of it and I put it online. And I got covered by Pop Sugar Moms and Reader's Digest and, Good Housekeeping. And that was the beginning of Mighty and Bright. And it was something that I just kind of like ran on the side of my full-time job for about 6 years. And then when my daughter was 6, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Hmm.
And at the time, I thought, I really don't want this to be as awful as my divorce was because my divorce was just horrible and it went on
Hmm.
for ages. And already, like day one, it was way worse. And our lives were just total chaos. It's like you're trying to balance being a single mom and going through cancer treatment and doctor's appointments and
Hmm.
who's picking her up from school and who's dropping her off and what's for dinner and like all these things.
Right.
And it was so much. And so I created a calendar to kind of keep track of all of that for her because I started to notice that there was a lot of anxiety around, especially school pickups, and worrying that because it wasn't me doing it all the time, that maybe somebody might forget her. And so I started to just plot all of this stuff out. And again, it really helped. And so now this kind of was the basis for the whole company is visual schedules that help kids through all kinds of stuff, whether it's divorce or cancer or foster care or, everyday
Yeah.
things like just most kids don't do super well with
Hmm.
transition. Pretty much every single one of them can benefit from having a sense of control over their lives, which is what happens when they have their own calendar.
Hmm.
If they are autistic, I have resources specifically for neurodivergent kids. So the schedules are really, kind of where it started. But I also have a whole line of children's books explaining tough
Yeah.
things like divorce and cancer and just general change, and a line of mental health products so that
Mm-hmm.
parents can help their kids learn and learn alongside them mental health skills that will really, because we hear so much about all the terrible statistics in the world and like all
Mm-hmm.
the bad things that our kids are exposed
Right.
to. And I just wanted to create something positive so that parents knew that they could do something to make a difference in their kids' mental health and
Yeah.
wellness. And it's been really, really fun. So, yeah, that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
It's such a great resource. Thank you for creating this. I mean, I think you really nailed it on the head when you said like, you know, us as adults can go through these crises when like you don't know what's happening, yet we forget that our children have the same struggles. They just don't know how to articulate it. So having
Absolutely.
calendars or books to give language to what their feelings are is so important. And we just forget.
Totally.
I mean, especially as busy moms and dads too, but I think moms do it a little bit differently and are a little bit more chaotic just because we're trying to juggle so much. It's like having something that you can coordinate with and be able to talk to your children about is just life-changing, life-giving too.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
And I think that I call it a connection calendar, the weekly calendar, because it's made of just like it's a magnetic board and it
Mm-hmm.
has these little glass magnets, but they come with sticker sheets that are reusable stickers that will just stick
Mm-hmm.
and stick and stick. So the idea is that you don't have 1,000 magnets laying around. And
Right.
every Sunday you sit down with your kid and you kind of plan out the week. And the kids
Yeah.
love it because they get to peel the stickers off and
Yeah.
put them on. But it's an opportunity for them to be reminded that you are a safe person that they can talk to, that if they are worried about something that's coming up in the week, they can talk to you about it.
Mm-hmm.
It really is just like a 5-10 minutes weekly that you're getting into this routine that really creates a really wonderful opportunity to communicate and connect with
Yeah.
your kids.
No, I love that too. And I just love that you also found the silver lining through all of these, what could be terrible circumstances in your
Mm-hmm.
life to really make this beautiful product. So,
Thank
yeah.
you.
I mean, I got divorced when my kids were 2 and 4, and it was crazy, and I wish I
Mm-hmm.
had something like this back then just to be able to communicate with them. And even now, they're older, they're 9 and 11, almost 10 and 12, but there are days where they're like, when are we going to daddy's? Even though it's like the same day every week, it's a Monday to
Yeah.
Monday. We do the 50-50 custody, but it's like just that expectation and anticipation of when things are changing, you can
Mm-hmm.
sense it in them that they're getting ready to let
Yeah.
go of me and to move into dad mode. And it's hard for
Mm-hmm.
everybody. So I think having something like this to actually connect, like you said, and use that language to communicate.
Yeah, and this kind of thing can really help with transitions too, to your point. They are mentally getting prepared for this stuff. And if you sit down and you can show them what's happening, you can also give them something to look forward to when that
Mm-hmm.
transition happens. Because anybody who's listening who has been through a divorce, those transition days are just awful. They
Yeah.
come home and everybody is melting down. Like that adjustment is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And if you plan the whole thing out with your kids, you can say, we can do pizza night, we can do movie night, we can go out for ice cream. Which one of those do you want to do,
Yeah.
on our transition day? And then they get to choose it. And then they have something that they can look forward to when they're coming back. And it really
Yeah.
does help.
No, I love that. I think, even my kids today, they're like, why are you guys divorced? Like, this makes it so hard. It's not like my other friends. And I think having
Mm-hmm.
some fun activity for them to look forward to is so important. And I think, again, going back to that connection piece, that open communication, I think so many times, well, I don't want to get into like my childhood too much and traumas and my parents, but I think our generation is very different where
Oh, yeah.
my parents didn't talk about stuff. It was like, shove it all under the rug, like move on or go to your room, like don't talk for days. And it's like, I'm trying to do things different. And I think having those moments of connection are crucial and just showing like
Yeah.
we can be scared, we can have fears or doubts, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. I think, in some ways, it's really great how things have changed
Mm-hmm.
because we are raising a much more resilient generation of kids that can cope with things.
Yes.
For us, we've kind of been sandwiched in this really hard space
Yeah.
of like, okay, there's like a billion resources out there. There's 100,000 pieces of research that everybody is telling me I'm doing it
Hmm.
wrong from like every angle. And we didn't learn these things when we were kids. And
Right.
so we're trying to teach something, but we don't really feel super qualified to teach it.
Yeah.
It's a really uncomfortable space that we've been put in. And I think a lot of parents think like, I just want to do it right. Like,
Hmm.
how do I do it right? And
Hmm.
I think that's a lot of pressure that we have. And, I think a lot of us have stacks of parenting books on our nightstands that are like 9 miles high and no time to read it.
Hmm.
And then lots of guilt that we didn't read it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the goal with the mental health program. It's called Raising Resilience, because
Love it.
I realized this was a problem during COVID when we were hoping that when kids went back to school, that the schools were going to be able to help our kids cope with this stuff, because
Hmm.
all the therapists were booked up. And, you know, then it turned out that teachers were just like so overloaded they couldn't cope with even teaching
Yeah.
our kids stuff because they were so far behind. And so I thought, is there a way to bring some of the like positive research home in a way that is easier to understand?
Hmm.
Because you are on social media and it's like, oh, the suicide rates are so high, and this terrible thing
Right.
happened,
All the
and it
negativity.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, it just feels like you're suffocating.
Hmm.
And but what could we do? And so I started researching, and it turned out the researchers have already figured out what the protective factors are for kids' mental health, like what needs to happen in childhood in order to raise kids that can cope with stuff and not have the suicide rate and not
Hmm.
have, all these issues. But nobody had taken that research and made it easy to deal with. They
Yeah.
were like community interventions and all these things that, are just not in reach of most
Hmm.
parents. And so I got an advisory board together, and I got an early childhood specialist, and we created this program that basically took these stacks and stacks of research and like all of the books, everything that, minus the fluff, and made
Yeah.
it into, these little 24-page booklets to teach us different skill every month so that
I
parents
love
can
that.
feel like they're actually doing something, but also you don't need to have mastered this stuff in order to teach it, because the book, like one of the months is about learning to manage your emotions, and it comes with a children's book where you can learn how the nervous system works in a fun way, and then learn how to manage that at home. And it's like easy to implement and it's easy to learn, so we don't have that like horrendous guilt anymore
Hmm.
and not know what we're doing, because it's
Yeah.
it's too much. Like as a parent these days, it's too freaking much.
It is too much.
you know?
Yeah. Like you said, no. And I love how like the parents are learning alongside their kids too.
Yeah, because we didn't learn this stuff. Our
No,
parents didn't know.
no, they didn't know. And I mean,
Some of them weren't capable.
right. I mean, I feel like my parents did their best, but what I know now, I'm like, were you? Like, I
Yeah,
don't know. I mean, it's just different
yeah.
times and we're all learning as we go,
Hmm.
which isn't always comfortable or easy. And then, our kids don't realize it either. So they're like, why are you so frustrated? It's like, I'm just stumbling my way through this,
Yep.
and we're all just hanging in there and trying to love on each other. But some days are
Doing
harder
best we
than
can.
others. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, my ex-husband married a therapist, and we were at their house, and she had this piece of artwork in the bathroom that had these like little like scribbles, and it said, "We are all just broken messes doing our best to take care of one another." And I was like, that is awesome and so true.
It is. And I think it's important to remind your kids, like, we're not perfect. Like, we are learning as we go too. And you want to be that safe place to provide kind of that direction, but like, we might get it wrong. And
Totally.
that's okay.
And we can apologize. I think that's the other thing maybe our parents' generation didn't realize, or weren't evolved enough to do,
Hmm.
is that apology is actually more beneficial to our kids than having gotten it right to begin with,
Yeah. Yeah.
because our kids are learning that it's okay not to be perfect, because none of us is perfect,
Right.
but we do need to, suck it up and say, I'm sorry when we mess up,
Yeah.
and sit with those uncomfortable feelings and confess, that we could have done it better. And that's a great example for our kids.
Yeah. I know. I definitely love that repair piece. I mean, I haven't had to do it in a while, but there are moments where I'm like, I'm just going to go to my room. Like, I'm going to put myself in timeout because I need a break
Yeah.
and we'll chat in a minute
Yeah,
and
totally.
we'll come back and it'll be fine and we'll, talk about it. But yeah, that never happened in my house growing up. So again, learning as I go.
Yeah, it was the days of, because I'm the grown up, that's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah. Go to your room, come out
Yeah.
when you've figured out what you did wrong and like,
Exactly.
okay.
Super helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
Definitely.
Different world for sure.
Hmm.
But I think we can also, because I want to talk about routines a little bit more and rhythms, because I think that repair piece is important too. And having kind of that routine of like coming together and talking about like what's going on in our world, that same for kids of like, okay, you look down today. I mean, I have a preteen. I think you do too. So it's like they're a little bit moody, but if we can get in that routine and rhythm of talking to them about like,
Yeah.
hey, just share with me, like I am that safe space, and just providing kind of that openness of conversation.
Hmm.
How does that look like for you in your household of kind of just sharing that dialogue, whether things are going good or bad?
One of the things that we've gotten into the habit of doing are conversation cards. We have some
Hmm.
conversation cards called door openers, and they're like specifically for building connection with your kids, where you sit and, like, at dinner time, usually you can choose a card, and it's kind of a deeper question to kind of get to
Mm-hmm.
know your kids better, but also the idea is that the parent shares first.
Oh, yeah, I like
And
that.
so the kids are getting to, because I don't know about you, but my daughter is always like, tell me a story of when you were a kid. Tell me some weird stuff.
Oh, gosh.
Like they're kind of interested in who we are.
Yeah.
And so that's been kind of fun. And I think the other thing is that I think because my daughter and I have been through so much in her
Yeah.
childhood, and I've always been open with her and explained what was going on and apologized when I messed up. And, I really tried to make that open communication a priority.
Mm-hmm.
She feels good about sharing with me when something is going wrong, or when somebody has done something that maybe is making her uncomfortable. She knows that when she comes to me, I'm not going to get mad at her about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a really big difference, as she's in seventh grade, which was the worst year of my entire existence. And I've had cancer.
Yeah.
It was awful. And, my own stuff kept coming up, where I was dreading her going into seventh grade because I was putting my own story on her,
For sure.
thinking that she was going to have a just awful time. But after having built this kind of foundation with her of being able to talk about things, of, you know, sharing with her and having her share with me, it has been so cool to see how that emotional intelligence that she's built, and those
Mm-hmm.
coping skills and those communication skills, have really turned her into a kid who is making really smart choices about her friends. I made the worst decisions in friends when I was in seventh grade, just the worst. I was like, I don't know who I am.
Right.
I
Oh,
don't know what
so
I
hard.
want. You're cool. I'm not cool. I think I
Yeah.
want to be cool. So I'll be friends with you, even though you're super mean.
Right.
She's just more settled in her own values as a
That's good.
result, I think, of this kind of, interaction that we've
Mm-hmm.
had over the years. And because she's settled in that and is confident in that, she's like, there are kids that are like vaping in the bathroom. And
Oof.
I'm just
Yeah.
like, why would you do that?
No.
And she's like, I don't really want to be friends with this person because they said something that's homophobic. And I'm like, oh, wow, good on you. Because I
Yeah.
think when I was in seventh grade, it would have been like, this person said something that I know is wrong and feels bad in my heart. But if I
Right.
say something, just like
Yeah.
and that kind of thing snowballed for me, because I
Yeah.
had low self-esteem in seventh grade because I chose bad friends. I chose a bad boyfriend, which chose a bad marriage. It just like
Yeah,
went on
it
and
does.
on. So it's really cool to see kind of how the kind of person that she's turning into. I'm really proud of her.
I love
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, I just really am super impressed with her.
That's exciting to watch. I have moments of that as well. Usually at bedtime, where they're like, they still want me to come and cuddle with them and we chat. And it's like, I don't remember ever doing this with my mom. So I love this, and you just get little
Yeah.
insight into their heart and what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
We also do a similar thing at dinner, usually because I'm tired. I'm like, my brain hurts. I don't know how to have a conversation right now, especially as the only adult
Yeah.
here. Like, someone else carry the load. But we have this book, and it's just, ask questions. And it's so fun to read through them. And it's actually a 3-year book. So you can look back and like the previous years of what they answered
Oh,
with,
that's so
So you kind
cool.
of see
I
their
love
evolution.
that.
Yeah, it's fun.
What a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of negative stuff that people talk about with teenagers and preteens and, so much dread about it, maybe because we were difficult teenagers. But I will say, I think that parenting is a lot easier right now. It could probably get hard again. I don't want to jinx myself.
Yeah.
But I think it's a lot easier to parent when the person that you're talking to, you're not trying to control them, first off, because that is error number one. But I think she just is really cool to hang out with. Like, she's fun, she's funny, and it's a lot easier to talk to her than it was to talk to the 4-year-old who was just like losing her crap over the wrong colored cup. So, anybody who's listening with younger kids, like, it's fun. I'm having a great time.
No, I agree. You said, like, I think our parents, it was just like, you're just this being to control. It was just like, oh, I just got to get them through whatever this next stage is and not have that connection. Yet we are connecting. And so it is more fun. Yeah. I'm having fun too. So
yeah, I don't think my parents ever helped me question things. And I really do believe, especially my mom did the absolute best that she could do. And she's awesome. But I think it was a different time. And I think if she had asked me different questions or had me kind of questioning things, I never questioned a single thing they told me.
No, me neither.
And so I've always encouraged my daughter, like, if I say something and it doesn't make sense to you, ask me why. And the why is always really important. And sometimes I will say, the reason is because this, this, and this. And other times I'm like, that's a good point. I don't know why.
Why do I believe this thing?
Yeah. So let's talk about that. And maybe there's some kind of compromise that, we can both come to. And that, like, why, the questioning, I think, is part of why she is set up a little bit differently than I was.
Yeah.
Because maybe that is a protective thing when she gets to choosing boyfriends and husbands and things.
Yeah. What came to mind when you were saying that for me, it was like, I felt like my childhood was very black and white. It was like, just get the good grades, go to college. I don't know. Then you figure it out because you're going to be an adult then, and I feel like the world's not black and white.
Not my job anymore.
Yeah. And so we are asking more questions. We are questioning the authority that we had. And I think, I love that you guys are a curious household.
I don't know that I really realized that that I had kind of set it up that way until I was talking to my mom about kind of how different it was. We moved when I was a junior in high school. My dad was a doctor, and it was important that I not tell people that we were moving, because we had like 6 months where my dad had to keep his patients or we were going to have no money. My parents just were like, you're not allowed to tell your friends. And I was like, okay. So I just kept this.
Yeah.
Didn't question why. Nothing. I never questioned anything.
Oh my gosh.
It didn't even occur to me to disobey them.
Yeah.
And I was telling my mom, and I was like, why would I not have even said, please? Like, I said nothing. And I feel like my daughter just the other day is like, you said this, but it really doesn't make any sense to me. And then I can say, this is my reasoning. And she's like, okay, that makes sense to me now. And I feel better about this rule that you put in
Yeah.
place.
It's not just a statement that is the final answer. Yeah. Junior year. That's tough though to move.
Yeah, it was not pleasant. But in retrospect, I think it was the best thing that could have happened to me because I was still friends with those friends that I made in seventh grade who were really actually quite toxic to me as friends. So I think it was actually a good thing.
Yeah. I'll have to keep that in mind in case I ever move again.
Yeah, sometimes bad news turns into good news later.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as a single mom, how do you take care of yourself? Because I think it's important for us moms to not just keep pouring into others, but pouring back into ourselves.
Yeah, I think when I first became a single mom, I didn't do a very good job with that. I think I would take care of myself when my daughter was with her dad only.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she stopped seeing him for like, extended periods of time, I was like, oh, well, now what do I don't have that anymore, that space anymore, because I would
Yeah.
never choose myself over my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
which now I realize by choosing myself, I am choosing my daughter.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if I don't have the resources, then I'm not going to be the best mom I can be.
No,
And
definitely
I
not.
think it took getting cancer to realize that the way that I needed to prioritize myself was by
Mm-hmm.
accepting the help that was offered to me.
Yeah.
Because I used to feel like, blah, blah, blah is offering to do this, but they don't actually want to do this. And it's like an imposition on them. And
Mm-hmm.
they didn't choose my life. They just feel pity for me. And so I don't want anybody to feel pity for me. So I'm just going to say no because they didn't choose this. Oh my God. I would just tie myself into a pretzel with the
Yeah.
excuses as to why it was that I couldn't accept help. And then the day I was diagnosed with cancer, I worked at a startup and my CEO had known that I was going in for this follow-up that we all thought was going to be nothing. I
Mm-hmm.
was having early detection because so many women in my family have had breast cancer.
Okay.
I had felt something like a weird sensation that they kept saying wasn't cancer, but then they
Mm.
saw something funny on my MRI that was supposed to be the baseline, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so they were like, we're just going to look at it.
Yeah.
And so I'm expecting for them to be like, you have dense breasts, everything is fine.
Right.
And my CEO called me and was like, how did the appointment go? And I'm sitting there in shock. And I'm
Oh
like,
gosh.
well, it turns out that I actually have cancer. And she's like, I'm sorry, what? And I'm
Yeah.
like, not able to access any emotions at this time. I
Right.
think it probably took me like a month. I would call my friends and say, so I have cancer. And they burst into tears. And I'm thinking, why is everyone crying? My CEO was like, what can I do? How can I help? And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. And
Yeah.
she said, can I bring you dinner? Can I bring you groceries? And I was like, no, I'm fine. And then almost immediately, it was like this little voice was like, you actually are not fine.
Right.
If she does not bring you dinner, you will not eat.
Yeah.
And so I said, actually, Jackie, I would love it if you could bring me dinner because I don't know what I'm going to eat otherwise.
Yeah.
And she was like, thank you. And she like brought me like the most enormous bag of groceries and like all this prepared food.
Oh.
And she said to me, I just wanted to be able to do something. So thank you for letting me do something. And that really was the beginning of my realizing that this whole thing of accepting help, it's a cycle of
Mm-hmm.
like giving and receiving. And when something goes wrong, I do want to help people.
Yeah.
And that by my saying no, I'm like cutting off this cycle and then making the other person feel like they can't do anything. And then they have nowhere
Right.
to put all of this energy that wants to help. And so that has become something that is my taking care of myself is when I need help, I ask for it. And I
Mm-hmm.
moved to Oregon from California. My ex-husband moved to Colorado from California, and I was just so tired of trying to make it work in a very expensive place where I didn't have
Yeah.
any family support.
I get it.
And so part of taking care of myself was making the decision to move my child and I to another state, which devastated her and was really, really hard. But I had
Mm-hmm.
a friend say, Sarah, if you don't have resources, if you are not resourced, you cannot be a resource for your daughter. And
I love
so,
that.
as terrible as I felt separating her from her friends and the state that she had been born and
Mm-hmm.
raised in, they moved us to Oregon, and it has been such a good decision for both of us. And now, if I have something going on, I can say to my mom, hey, would you mind picking her up from school?
Yeah.
And she's happy to do it. And it's turned into something that I feel so much more at peace now.
Yeah.
So I think asking for and accepting help is the number one thing that I do to take care of myself.
I love that. Yeah. Isn't it amazing how I think a lot of women do this where we just feel like we're a burden if we ask for help? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, like you said, like people want to offer help
Yes.
and we just cut them off because we're like, no, 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 I'll just do it all. And then I'll be even more stressed out because I'm doing it all. And it's like, just stop.
Right.
Ask for help.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's the whole village mentality,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is like, I could not, I had so little resources myself. I was barely keeping my nose above water. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't help anybody who needed help because I was drowning.
Right.
And so I just assumed everyone else was also drowning,
Yeah.
but that was not the truth. They were getting help from other places.
Right. And it just goes back to that communication too. It's like, well, if you don't ask them, the answer is going to be no anyway. So it's like, you just don't know someone else's situation. So you might as
Right.
well just reach out too.
And their situation is their business.
Yeah.
If they are offering, don't act like you know better than them. They're
Right.
offering.
Yeah. Say yes and thank you. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think having kind of that awareness or even routine, if you want to call it, of asking for help, just eliminates so much decision fatigue too, where you're like, I don't have to figure this all out by myself. And I have this village that I can go to. And that goes for other things too. I think just having routines in general is a great way to eliminate decision fatigue.
Routine wise, like if you want to go back to routines, I
Mm-hmm.
think getting enough sleep is, really important to me because if I don't go to sleep, I tried to explain it to my daughter, like I have a certain window. And if I miss that
Mm-hmm.
window, then I can't go to sleep. And unlike her, if she stays up late and can sleep in until 10 a.m., I'm up at 6 no matter what.
Yeah.
So just trying to incorporate these things into my life. The thing I have not mastered yet is the like meal planning and healthy eating part of it.
Yeah.
That is just always been a challenge for me.
I feel like there's always one thing where you're like, I know I should be doing that, but
Hmm.
can't figure it out. The sleep one's for me. I'm like, I know better. I just
Yeah,
stay up too late.
totally.
And then I'm grumpy. I'm like, okay, you know how this works. Like, just go to
I
bed.
know. I'm like, I know that bag of Cadbury mini eggs is going to make me feel terrible.
Right?
I think I'll eat it anyway.
Yep. Yep. Those 5 minutes of deliciousness. Yeah, I get it. I do that too.
Oh, those are my favorite. They were the favor at my wedding.
Oh my gosh.
We bought them in April and then had them at our wedding in August because they are my favorite
Oh my
candy. So
gosh.
Easter's dangerous
Oh,
for me.
yeah. Are they the ones with the hard shell? I totally don't
Yes.
understand.
Yes.
Yes. They're
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
good.
Oh, they're amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. They can't, I just don't want them to come out with like, Cadbury something for every
Oh,
holiday.
right. I
Like,
know that would
oh,
be
I
the
would be
worst.
wrecked.
Yeah.
They're like, it's Cadbury spiders for
Right.
Halloween and Cadbury Christmas trees.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Keep it to
Yeah.
Easter. Pretty safe then.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, what's next and where can my audience find you?
What's next is a book about grief.
Oh, that's going to be good.
Yeah, I think a lot of my children's books are different than other books in that they really talk about how something will affect a child's day-to-day life. So, for example, the divorce book is different from other divorce books because it explains divorce. It explains, that it's not the child's fault, all of these things that every divorce book needs to cover. But
Hmm.
then it goes a step further and says, this is what happens to your life when your parents live in different houses.
Yeah.
This is the feelings that you might have. And so my books on cancer are used in children's hospitals. And so I work a lot with these child life specialists who help kids cope with difficult things when they're in a hospital. And this explains the science of cancer and kind of how the body works. And one of the things that they came to me with was, we really need a book about what happens when someone is going to die.
Yeah.
And, how that affects the child, emotionally, and just like really concrete. Because like a book about change, I have another book called Nothing Stays the Same, but that's okay. And it talks about how there's all these changes that happen in our lives. They can make us feel overwhelmed. They can have us like having thoughts in the back of our mind, and then we're like yelling at the cat for not doing what we want, but it wasn't really about the cat.
Right.
So the next book I'm doing is one about what happens when a child asks the question, are you going to die? And the answer is yes. And then probably a follow-up one to that of like how you cope with grief, because grief is not just about death. Grief is anytime something is taken away without your consent. So kids feel grief when they lose a lovey. They feel grief when their parents get divorced. They feel grief when they move. So those two books are what's next.
That's exciting. I mean, I feel like grief is a whole other topic. I mean, I think a lot of adults still struggle with that too. And that
it's awful.
It is. I mean, I think it goes back to our childhood. It's that inner childhood wound that we just never really addressed, and comes out as anger, usually as adults, but again, whole other topic. But yeah, I could definitely see how all of these books can definitely help parents or adults, as they are helping their children too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody, you can find me at mightyandbright.com. And I'm also on both TikTok and Instagram, on Facebook too, at Mighty and Bright Co.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story and all of your amazing products. I can't wait to get my hands on them. So
thank you so much. This was really wonderful. Thank you.
So my friend, no matter what you're facing, I want you to know that you're doing your best. Be kind to yourself. I know that sometimes it's scary to share, but if you need extra support, know that your mental health is just as important as your physical health. Now, in addition to all of Sara's resources, I encourage you to seek therapy. And BetterHelp offers online therapy sessions that you can access from the comfort of your own home. Their platform is easy to use and provides a variety of therapy options, including chat, phone, and video sessions. If you're ready to take the first step toward improving your mental health, sign up for 10% off of your first month of therapy. Go to betterhelp.com/PGish. And if you loved Sara or think that her books and calendars can help you and your family, check out the links in the show notes. And if today's episode resonated with you and you love PGish, please share this episode with a friend so that more parents can grow alongside their kiddos like you. See you next time.